Hello there. So in this video we will be looking at an online audio summarization application. So basically what an audio summarizer does is it takes an audio file as an input and summarizes it into its corresponding text. So basically this helps the user in effectively understanding the content in lesser time. Instead of listening to the complete audio file, we can just check out the summary and figure out what's happening, right? So it has many real-time use cases also. Basically, we can use this as a podcast summarizer, which is indeed the work it performs in this application. So basically, the entire length of the podcast audio files might happen to be more than an hour or at least 30 minutes, right? So listening to the entire clip would be frustrating rather than we can have a look at its summary itself, right? So it would save a lot of time and it would be more convenient as well. Similarly, as in the case of podcast, we can use this app to summarize speeches also, speeches by famous personalities, politicians, anything. So basically we can get the crux of the speech from the summary itself and know what's happening or what's going to happen. Now we can also have this application summarize video lectures or classes for schools or universities. So basically we would uh, have the notes or the important points that are covered in the lecture or the classes. Talking about the existing systems, the main problem that we face here is the quality of the summary that has been generated. So the summary has to be apt and on point when we take a look at it. So generating that quality of summary is not easier and not possible for some simpler applications, right? So the summary has to be very accurate, which is not happening right now. Next is pre-processing. So we are dealing with audio files here. So, as I mentioned, podcasts or speeches or recordings, lectures. So we are dealing with audio files. There might be a lot of noise in these files. So we need to consider that also in the input audio. So basically we would have to pre-process this audio files into proper transcripts. So basically we will be converting the audio file to a document which would uh, contain the notes of the entire clip. So basically that conversion, it has to be very accurate in order to generate an accurate summary further. So basically that conversion we need to deal with noise, we need to pre-process the clip properly, which is somewhat missing in the current existing system, right? Because that noise handling is not very accurate, and thus the summary that would be generated using the noisy input would be not very accurate at the end of the day. So basically we need to handle that, which is not being handled in the existing system. Another thing about pre-processing, as I already mentioned, we need to pre-process it correctly so that the emphasis of the clip is clearly visible in the summary also. Like the overall idea around which the podcast or the speech is revolving, it should be visible in the summary as well. So pre-processing is very important to deal with. Now let's talk about the proposed system. In the app which we have developed, we basically uh, generate accurate summaries using an API provided by Assembly AI. So basically the API, it is used to convert the audio file into a transcript, and then we will be using the same API to generate the summary also. So the accuracy is pretty high, as the API is processing the audio file at the foundational level, and the outputs are also amazing, which I found during the testing phase. So another thing is the pre-processing part. As I mentioned, in our proposed system, we have handled pre-processing quite correctly, because that you can already see in the code also, because the output summary which we see at the end of the process is quite good. The summary generated is quite accurate and on point considering the audio file. that we gave as an input. So pre-processing is also handled very nicely in our proposed system, so that does not pose a problem at the end of this at the output side. Talking about the algorithms which we have used, algorithms and APIs. So here we have used listen notes API to get the audio files. So here we do not need to give the entire audio file as an input. We can just give the input as a episode ID. So basically, listen notes, it gives an episode ID to each podcast. So basically, we need to enter that ID and click the submit button here to get the summary of the entire podcast. So we have used that API. Secondly, we have processed the audio file here in the code. You can see this in the summarise.py file. We have performed the pre-processing with the audio file and given it to assembly AI in order to generate the summary. So three things we have been using here. First is listen notes API to get the audio file as an input, or get the URL, get the audio file, and then start the pre-processing part. So pre-processing part is performed here in the summarizer.py part, and finally we use the assembly AI API to generate the summary for the podcast and get the transcript also. So you can see it in the code as well. We are using the retrieve URL podcast to get the input from the listen notes website or the API. We will be sending a transcription request also. This uses the assembly AI API, as I said, and here is the summarizing part, as I mentioned. So basically these are the overall algorithms which we have used in the code part. Main purpose of using the listen notes API here is basically the user does not have to upload the entire audio file here, because the audio files, considering podcasts, it might be pretty much heavy to handle them. So it might be dealing in MBs. So some megabytes would be there for the audio file. So uploading that to the server and then processing it would be more tougher. So to make the process simple, we have used the listen notes API. We can directly enter the episode ID and retrieve the podcast from their API. So that makes the process easier. And also the pre-processing part. In the pre-processing part, we have handled the audio file pretty much accurately. So the pre-processing also is on point, I guess. So it does not take any noisy clip from the audio file as an input. So it basically cleans all the noise and gets the clear text as the output. Lastly, we have used the assembly AI. As I mentioned, it is one of the most trusted and foundational APIs. So basically it provides us with the summary of the entire audio file or the audio clip without any loss of information. So the main idea or the abstract which we want to see is always visible to us in the summary. So this eventually gives us a pretty good accuracy and output. So now let's have a look at how the application works. So basically, as I mentioned, we need to enter the episode ID here. So basically I am here on the listen notes website. I look for the under the best business podcast, I see a podcast called CoinDesk Podcast Network. So let's take a look at how this podcast summary is generated. So basically we will be clicking on this link, use API to fetch JSON, and we can see here there's an ID for the podcast. So this ID we will have to copy it and paste it on our application. So this is our application. Basically it asks for the episode ID here, and let's click submit. So this would take some time to process. So I already have it opened. After the processing part, I already have it done here. So we can look at the outputs also from here. Basically the transcription, for the entire audio file is visible here. The whole transcription is contained here. This episode is sponsored by Zengo, all of that stuff, everything is visible here. So this, the first line, it's actually a promotional promotion which it's doing in the podcast. So this part, uh, the beauty of assembly AI, it does not include the promotion as well. It directly starts the summary with the idea about which the podcast is being talked about. So basically you can have a look at how well the API works and how well the summary is generated. So yeah, this is the summary which has been generated, and you have a download option at the end as well. So you can see that this is a around 28 minutes, around half an hour podcast, and the summary, it's just a few lines. Okay, so it saves a lot of time if it's very accurate. So yeah, this is a very well developed use case which we are dealing, and this has a lot of several applications as well. So this is it for this audio summarization project. Thank you for your patient listening.